Okay, let's get started. Thank you everyone for joining. Our topic is you've got mail, secure one-click email-based approvals for any workflow. I am Paul Taylor, the President and CEO at Gideon Taylor, and we are doing all sorts of things in RECONNECT here. We've been sharing lots of mini sessions. This one is a full session, but you can get quick 20-minute sessions out of us for a number of great topics. We'll be doing our next one here, creating dynamic fluid eForms in a flash. That will be, if I can catch my breath, I'll do that one again here coming up at 4:05 Eastern today. So feel free to join us for any of those. Joining me is Scott Anton, the VP of Business Development here, and he is always great to talk to. 80s music, he's pretty much got it mastered, so if you can stump him. In fact, it would be interesting if you feel, if at any point here I'm not capturing your full attention, feel free to throw pop culture questions at Scott in the chat. We'll score him and see at the end. You know, as long as it's not ridiculous, we'll score and see how he does. I predict that that he will hit 6 out of 10 for or better for pop culture references that that date back that far or sooner. He's pretty current as well. So we're with Gideon Taylor. We have focused for years on revolutionizing PeopleSoft processes using electronic forms, using automation strategies and integration and custom development expertise. And we have been broadening our reach to encompass the full spectrum of PeopleSoft services. We took a quantum leap that direction with the acquisition of Newberry Enterprise Services, a full-service PeopleSoft consultancy, earlier this year. And combined, our two brands provide a full range of PeopleSoft services, including cloud hosting and cloud managed services. We had go live on Friday, BYU Hawaii. One of our clients just went live on OCI Cloud, and it was a great success. We had I challenged the team to do this go live from on-prem to cloud hosted with 30 minutes or less of production system downtime. They did it in 27 minutes. So lots of great things happening in our broader offerings. We're going to be focusing today on some features of GT eForms, a validated PeopleSoft automation solution. This allows us to build custom fluid applications inside of PeopleSoft without needing technical developers to do fluid development. So with that brief intro, let's jump into email-based approvals. So let's start out with the question, well, why should you use email-based approvals, or why would you want to? One great reason is to save clicks. So when you are doing an approval process for PeopleSoft-based form or PeopleSoft-based workflow, you get an email that says, hey, you have this transaction that's waiting for your approval. And then how many clicks does it take for you to actually render judgment or give your approval on that transaction? Email-based approvals can reduce that number of clicks. What else can it do for you? Well, that's about it. That's the main reason that you would want to do email-based approvals. It saves clicks, taps, swipes, types, scrolls, basically makes it faster for you to approve that transaction. So how does that actually look? Well, let's assume that you had received what PeopleSoft typically produces, which is a plain text email notification. And this plain text email notification just drops in your inbox and says, hey, you've got something to approve. Okay, so you open the email, you see that notification, you go to your browser, you click on PeopleSoft, you enter your user ID and password. You may not have to type that in. It might remember that. Whatever you may have to go through a two-factor authentication process in order to do that. Here I'm just assuming a straightforward user ID and password. But you sign in, you open the Fluid Approvals tile, you scroll to the transaction, you tap it to open, you look at the data, and you click Approve. Okay, so quite a few taps, swipes, scrolls there. All right, so let's make it better. Let's say that in the email notification, we give you a link to the Fluid Approvals tile. Okay, so that saves you a click at least, depending on whether the Fluid Approvals tile is on your home page in the first one, but still quite a bit more to go. What if we put a link directly to the form in there, which is what we typically do. So we've built hundreds of electronic forms processes with email notifications that by default go to the approvers. So they get an email and they'll have a link in that email that says click here to approve or click here to evaluate the form. And so they click that link and they've opened their email, they click the evaluate link, and then they enter their user ID and password. Now that only happens, of course, if it's the first time that you have gone into PeopleSoft in this session. After you've done it the first time, then clicking on a second link in a second email should take you straight to the form without you having to do your user ID and password and click sign in. Then you take a look at the data and you click approve. So we're getting shorter. We've knocked a few things off there. So what if we do an email-based approval? An email-based approval is going to have a link first off, it's going to have the form data that you need to make the decision in the email, and it's going to have an approve, maybe a deny link right in the email body. And so you open the email, you look at the data, you click approve, and you're done. And like we said, we've saved, especially if you're comparing to the top bullet here, a lot of clicks. So that is even though it's the only reason, it's a pretty good reason. It's a compelling reason. You can, especially if you're approving dozens of forms a week, this could save quite a bit of effort. And if you're looking to design a process that gets rapid response from your approvers, this could really help to facilitate that. And depending on the business process, that could have significant impact for good on your business process if you get a turnaround time that is significantly faster than you've had. So let's see what this looks like. So here I am logging in to PeopleSoft on a phone, and I'm going to come into a form, a return to work form, and I'm going to create this form. I need to fill out this form before I can come to work. So I flip a couple of things here, and it says, oh, you've got symptoms, sorry, stay home. Okay, well, let's say it's the next day. I'm feeling better. So let's flip those off and try again. So we're going to hit next. It says, oh, you are cleared, no symptoms. I've read the information, agree to follow instructions. I hit submit, right? So now this has routed to somebody, and it is the wellness coordinator. Okay, so now the wellness coordinator has received an email in their inbox and it doesn't have to say from PeopleSoft. You can set that up to be from wherever. But so here they've got their they've got their email. They can scroll down through and say, "Oh, yep, this person is good. I approve them to come to work." And this is what pops up there. Sorry. You get this little notification that says that has been approved, and you're done. You never had to log in, and now if we go back to the form itself and view that submission and view that, scroll down and see that form that was submitted, we'll be able to see that that was signed by the evaluator or by the wellness coordinator right here. Look at the signature logs, initiated by Lauren and signed by the wellness coordinator, executed by the system after that to log the fact that that happened. Okay, so pretty straightforward. It's not a very complicated demo because, again, we're trying to simplify this process as much as possible. So that's a so far no-brainer, right? Let's do email-based approvals. And I'll just mention that there are multiple ways to do this, and we'll talk about this more in a minute, but this is email-based approvals are a delivered feature now in GT eForms for the most recent version 3.30. So with that, it's config-based. You just turn on email-based approvals and set up your email template to use the approval link and the approve and deny links, and you're good to go. Well, sorry, there is a little bit more setup. You do need to install or walk through the process to set up the listener, and I'll talk about that here in a second. But you don't have to make big changes to your forms in order to do this if you're a GT eForms customer already. But there are security considerations, and so we said secure email-based approvals in the title of our session here. So are they really secure? Yes, they are. They are secure. Well, but we've got that little asterisk there, and so he said, well, maybe they're not secure. Well, sort of. They're sort of secure. It depends on what you mean by secure, and it depends on the situation. So let's dig into it a little bit. So what is secure about email-based approvals is you're a PeopleSoft system. You're not compromising. You're not opening up any doors that let people get into PeopleSoft, who's not supposed to be there. What isn't secure necessarily are any private or sensitive form data that you had to include in the email in order to allow the approver to say yes. So if you consider the data that you're sending in the form, if you consider that to be secured or to be sensitive data, you have to consider that you're sending it in an email, and you don't have any control after you hit send over what happens to that email. Now, this depends, of course, on what kinds of emails what email addresses you allow routing to. There are clients who have secure internal email addresses that have to be accessed over the VPN, that can't be forwarded or mirrored, that's going to be more secure because the data still stays inside of your network. If you say, okay, well, I'm going to send to any email address anyone puts in, we send out to a Gmail address, well, now the data that you put in the email is in Gmail's servers. And is that a bad thing? Well, not necessarily. It really depends on the transaction. You consider and you can compare and say, all right, well, do you use email to pass the PDFs around that have the same information in it? Well, then it's as secure as that. But it is a consideration to think about. And think about the fact that, yes, right, when you send out an email, you've got, first off, the possibility it could be intercepted during transmission, particularly emails that go outside of the firewall. And you have the fact that emails are stored on the client side. So Gmail stores emails on their servers, and then you're counting on the security of that storage. You're counting on the security of the recipient's account. You have other ISPs that provide email servicing that could end up storing that data. So highly sensitive transactions, it's possible that you might say, okay, no, this isn't the right, we don't want to do email-based approvals for this particular transaction. You also have potential security ramifications for unauthorized recipient behavior. So the recipient, you can tell the recipient, don't forward these emails, or don't share your password, but they still can. The way that we know we identify who signed this form is based on who we sent the email to, and that link is identified with that user. So if the recipient forwards the email to their assistant and says, hey, will you please sign my forms for me? The recipient could click those email links and sign the forms. Ditto with password sharing. Of course, password sharing can happen for any PeopleSoft transaction or any system. If you share your username and password with others, then of course that isn't terribly secure. So those are some of the security questions. And the challenge is you decide whether to use a feature like this is one of balance. You're balancing the security considerations with the efficiency considerations. And you should do so in context of the rest of your transactions. So you can look and say, do I need private or sensitive data on the form in order for an approval decision to be made? And what level of identity verification do I need for the approvers? For a lot of transactions that we do, it's not critical that you're not going to get sued if form data is gets forwarded to somebody and it's not the worst thing in the world if someone clicks on the link that an approver forwarded the information to. And again, the context is, well, do those same potential problems already exist even without the email-based approval? If the problem is with an approver sharing the data, well, how do we know that they're not sharing the data anyway? Even if you're having them log in, how do you know that they're not sharing their username and password? So there's certainly some business process control to look at, but you still want to balance this. You have efficiency considerations. if you need to engage with approvers who are casual, mobile, who are not authenticated, who aren't even authenticated into the system, then that's a good reason to use email-based approvals. So, and you have to balance with the costs of low or slow approver engagement. If you make it so hard for people to participate, for example, we have a client who has been using eForms-based automation for a long time, and here a few years ago, they added a fairly onerous two-factor authentication system in front of PeopleSoft and also in front of the forms that basically made it a lot harder to get in and take form actions. And what they saw was an increased demand to be able to handle these transactions without having to log in. And so what happened was they actually started building a whole process of a whole organization, an extension of HR for departments to actually pay to have an embedded HR rep who does the forms for them. So these embedded HR reps are doing the work of logging in and filling out the forms in order to protect the departments from the login process. And so then you say, okay, well, how are those departments getting that information to the embedded HR representative? Well, they're doing so in very insecure ways, including emails and PDFs that don't have any validation or verification, sticky notes, phone calls, all of these ways that have gaping security problems of their own. So they're taking a very inefficient approach and a very insecure approach in order to try to circumvent the security that was imposed on the system. So, and I'm sorry if this is a kind of a bummer of a conversation, but these are the balances that you have to strike. You have to decide, okay, what is the right balance between security and efficiency? I can add levels of security that make it worse, even make the security of the data worse. So it's a consideration, just things you need to think about as you decide whether to use this technology. Let me just pause, see if we have any questions. I'll give you a minute to.
Well, there is one question in the queue.
Okay.
Is this for GT eForms only, or can it be applied to other PeopleSoft?
Great question. So the functionality that we just showed is GT's implementation of email-based approvals. So to do what I just showed you, you do need GT eForms. There is an email-based approval option with Oracle native PeopleSoft workflow, and I will talk about that here in a second. So you can do email-based approvals. It's a little bit different. And I'll give you a look at that coming up here in just a minute. Okay, good question, thanks. So let's look at how this works. First off, we use what we call, sorry, I'm just moving my screens around so I can see everything. What we call our GT token technology in order to accomplish our implementation. So a token, it isn't actually a Bitcoin, but I like to have a physical representation. Actually, a Bitcoin isn't a Bitcoin either, but the token itself is actually a long unique identifier, also known as a UUID or a GUID or a UID that is infeasible to guess or fake. And these tokens are associated inside the system with the information that we need, about the approver. So we have a token, a unique token for every link on every eForm that gets sent out. That token is associated inside PeopleSoft with who the approver is, what form they're being asked to approve, and what action that token would represent that user taking. So with those bits of information, we can then put the token in the link in the email, send that out into the big bad world on that email, and you can't from the outside look up what the user ID is or what the form ID is that token links back to. But once that token gets clicked or sent, that you can follow that token back in, and we can then assume, or that we then know who we send it out to. We know what user ID it represents. So, and then the tokens themselves can also expire. So although, like I said, you can end up with a bunch of forms in a big old Gmail archive or in an email archive at some ISP that might get hacked sometime in the future. You don't want to have data in there that's really sensitive, that someone's going to crack open that email archive and harvest a bunch of Social Security numbers for your employees. You don't want that to happen. But assuming that you have used this for appropriate data that isn't going to matter if someone ends up looking at, you also don't want them being able to find links that let them mess with your system. So these links expire. So in a few days, depending on, it could be in a few days, in a few hours, you can say this link no longer works. So clicking it just results in an error. So that token then provides a bridge that allows us to record the transaction. Just need to make sure my just lost my headphone there. Can you still hear me? Sorry about that, everybody. So so the token then gets you access, gives a method for us to know who took the action and what action they took without actually exposing any sensitive data or sensitive data access. Oh, this looks like our format has pushed my formatting for this new deck has pushed the text around a little bit, but you'll be able to read it. So a normal PeopleSoft link typically follows this process. You click on the link, you face a login or two-factor authentication challenge. Once you pass that, you're then in an authenticated portal and can view information that is stored in the database or update that database. An approval email link, the way that we are doing this, goes through a public portal. The public portal has a token listener, hosts a token listener, and that's all you need to have on the public portal for this to work. The token listener is just a URL that it's an iScript for techies. It's just a URL that when it's passed a token ID, it can then check that token, validate it, make sure that it's valid, and then it can act on that. It can pass through code information to the database to say, hey, this form was approved, and then passes back a result to the person who clicked the link. But the person who clicked the link never gets into the database. So they never have even a login screen that they can get to. All they can do is click that link. So you have this token that we've sent out in the email link, and whoop, I did that again. And when when you click on that, it's going to move that token down to the token listener, and from there, it's going to it'll validate it and then act on it from there. And as I said, the user never actually gets into PeopleSoft. They just see the result that comes back. Okay, so here we'll just do a quick demo to show you what the setup looks like. So we go into form setup for GT eForms, and again, if you're not familiar with GT eForms, it is a native PeopleSoft bolt-on. So that means you can access it from inside PeopleSoft, but it doesn't show up on your compare reports. So here we have our notifications, and for this return to work form, we've created a custom email ID notification. So if we go to the setup table where we set these up, we'll show you what we had to do to turn on email-based approvals. We go into our parts gallery to email templates, look up our email template, and here we see the data. I managed to restart that. That should not have happened. Okay, so on this page, I think we're, okay, here we go. So a couple of things you need to do to get this to work. First, the send method needs to be set to unique email per recipient. That's because each recipient is going to get good heavens. Why am I starting over every time? One moment. Lost my mouse. Oh, maybe it's because that's all that I've got here. Okay. So so you set the unique email per recipient. Then we have delivered links down here that we're going to include in the email body that are click to approve and click to deny. So by putting those in, basically that's all you need to do in order to turn on email-based approvals for an eForm. That does assume that you have set up a public portal and exposed the token listener on that public portal, which we have instructions for that we can help you with. So, other ways of doing this. We had a question, can you do this? Is this only a GT eForms approach, or can you do it otherwise? And yes, you can do it otherwise. There is a delivered email approvals feature in PeopleSoft. And you can ask, well, am I going to tell you about it? Yes, I am. You could also ask, do I have any biases toward the delivered solution that may compromise my objectivity? I do not have any such, well, PowerPoint has a built-in lie detector. And so, yes, I guess I do have some biases. I really don't like how this works. So forgive me, but I'll do my best to give you an idea. So this is an Oracle visual of how the delivered HTML email approvals feature works. There is and basically it involves kicking off an email-based response that says the action that you want to take rather than clicking a link like ours. So the user action is actually sending an email, and then you have the response repository is an email box and a listener that processes emails that get sent back to it. So the processor chews through the email, interprets the response, and then executes a service operation to log the results. So it ends up looking like this. You have a form that does have approve and deny links in it. This is a delivered email, that approval email that gets sent out. And when you click on that link, it basically opens up in your email program a pre-populated email response, and that points back to a PeopleSoft managed email address. And then you make sure that you don't type anywhere in these fields, because that will mess everything up. And these fields are kind of the instructions that are going to tell the processor what to do and what transaction to consider this an approval of. You can add comments in here, but basically you've got to make sure you don't modify anything else, and then you send it. And so that's basically the delivered approach. The pros for that, nice thing is that it does check to see what email address the reply was from. And we're not doing that. So you could say, all right, well, that adds some, it adds a check. The cons are, it's a clunky, failure-prone user experience. It depends on their email sending to your address. It depends on them not messing up the email before they send it. You get an extra click. Remember, we're all about reducing clicks. That's the main reason to do this in the first place. You depend on their client handling email to links appropriately, and not all clients will, not all phones will, not all laptops will, and so you're depending on some extra systems there. You're going to end up with a bunch of stuff in your sent folder. You've got moving parts and fail points on the back end system of trying to digest those emails, and the value of knowing what email address it was sent from. Email addresses are easily spoofed. And saying that, you could say, all right, well, that means that some really smart hacker is going to be able to spoof it. No, even you don't even need a dumb hacker. You just need someone who knows the features of email programs like Outlook. So in case you don't know how to hack someone else's email address or spoof it, meaning that, not hack it, but spoof it, meaning that you can make it look like the email came from someone else, I am here to help you out. Here's how easy it is to do that. I like periodically to send emails from Scott. It just keeps him on his toes. So I have if you hit the drop-down box in Outlook when you're sending an email, there's that other email address entry. So you click on that, and then you can put in any email address you want. I've put in Her Majesty the Queen, and Outlook will send the email as if it was from her. So it's not that tough. So again, that you get back to the question, well, are email-based approvals right for my transaction? Or what if they aren't right? Well, what do you do? Well, in GT eForms, the default is that you get a standard evaluate link that takes you through a login, so that you're logged in as yourself and you see the form data in PeopleSoft itself. It'll take you through whatever two-factor authentication protocol you have set up, and that's our default. It works great. But email-based approvals can really help streamline stuff. Like if you've got a bunch of forms that you need to approve regularly, like timesheet forms or anything that's high volume, especially if during rush times, email-based approvals can make a huge difference and can take out steps that people get hung up at trying to log into the system. You can also use it to involve people in workflow that don't have a login. So you can get approvals from external participants. We do this for Princeton University as they are gathering information from graduate students that are from external applicants who don't yet have their Princeton IDs. They can still participate and approve information in the onboarding process before they even have an ID, because email-based approvals sends them that link, that token authenticated link that lets us interact with them securely without having had to get them into the system yet. Okay, so a few ways that we can use this. This fits into an overall strategy that Gideon Taylor has of bringing external participants into approval processes inside of PeopleSoft. The Princeton here I mentioned was our first client implementing this, and they wanted to be able to have their applicants be able to interact with the system without having to give them a login. And again, that's one of those trade-offs. If you can have someone interact with the system without ever having to give them access to the system other than to be able to click on an approval link, that's a security plus, that you didn't have to give them a user ID and password. So that, excuse me, in this case, they are logged in as a guest user, but they actually do have a user ID behind the scenes. They just don't know what it is. So we know who set it. We know who clicked that link, but they don't know their user ID. They can only interact with the system as we allow them to. You can see there are other approaches here that may not involve email-based approvals, but that work with token authenticated guest users, where again, they can fill out forms for supplier contract registration without ever having a login to the system. They just received an invitation from a Prologis employee to fill out that form. The invitation had the token that gave them a link to be able to get in and work on the form. At UC Berkeley, they have graduate committees that include both internal committee members and external committee members. The external committee members don't have a login, and they don't need one. When we send out the forms for approvals to the committee members, we actually generate a user ID. Again, the recipient doesn't know their user ID. They just get a token that allows them to interact and approve the forms without ever even knowing that they have a user ID on the Berkeley system. So lots of different ways that we can help people interact with PeopleSoft without needing to grant them traditional access, and lots of ways to help high volume approvals or approvals for casual users be streamlined and simple, to get them engaged, get their responses without giving them a lot of hurdles that are going to make them not want to respond, or push up barriers or push off the work to other people. Okay, and again, a shameless plug here at the end. Email-based approvals is just one of many features that GT eForms provides. Lots of different ways, just an endless variety of transaction types that GT eForms can help with. We have dozens of clients with hundreds of different form solutions in production, hundreds of millions of transactions completed, and we have lots of, as we said, lots of functionality that includes the ability to build forms without having to do development to put fields on pages, the ability to pre-populate those forms with data from PeopleSoft, to have a conditionally driven form behavior that allows the form to unfold naturally and be responsive to the end user. We can restrict valid values, run edits, make sure the data is clean before you ever see it, take bulk actions, be able to get many things done at once. You can manage attachments. You can have great routing options that make it much easier to implement AWE-based routing, and all of that inside of security with whatever edits and validations you need, and the ability to report on that data. Lots of amazing results that we've seen over the years that many of which are quantified, many of which can't be, but that make a huge difference in people's lives and help users to have a much better interaction with the system and accomplish the business of the organization with less resources. So just a few last hits on, let's see, how am I doing on time? A few last thoughts here. You have a number of different areas that you can use GTE forms across HCM, across financials, across campus solutions. You have, we're used across all industries and in multiple countries, and lots of opportunities to make things better. As we mentioned, we'd like to draw attention to Princeton's success recently in being able to turn around a couple of forms. They were thought of, the need was identified on a Thursday, they were in production the next day on a Friday. And GTE forms can use functionality that's that fast, or they can also be used to deploy very complex, very robust applications that can host tons of functionality and tons of edits, and tons of automation. If you want to be able to add a very updated look and feel to PeopleSoft in general, or to just to GTE forms in particular, to really get that branded feel and a look and feel that says this is a really hip and modern application, and really wrap your users, your constituents in your brand. InFlight is a partner that we have worked with. They have a great product that both helps in branding PeopleSoft as a whole application, that can help to streamline individual self-service pages inside of PeopleSoft, and they have an eForm accelerator or eForm optimizer that has been built specifically for our forms to allow you to set great branding and styling for both desktop and mobile applications. And it seamlessly works with GTE forms, works with whatever forms you build to add great branding and very flexible branding, and to make those forms so that you can bring to bear industry standard design methodologies and skill sets to manage the look and feel of your application. So if standard fluid is starting to look boring to you, you can spice it up with InFlight's eForm. Did I use the right word? It's
The modernizer?
eForm optimizer or modernizer. I said optimizer. Their GTE form optimizer. Modernizer. I did it again. GTE forms modernizer. Okay, and you are welcome to get in touch with me here or with Scott And this session deck will be available for download and will be available to talk at our booth anytime that the exhibitor hall is open. And happy to answer any questions that come up later. Thank you everyone for joining, and we do hope to see you around the conference and come to our booth and chat us up. Thanks everyone for joining.